Dad, why didn't anyone come? Sophia Carter's voice echoed across the cavernous banquet hall, too large for the silence it carried. 24 pink balloons floated aimlessly above rows of untouched chairs, their ribbons swaying like forgotten promises. The grand princess castle cake stood pristine, untouched by knife or candle flame. The $1,000 clown checked his phone in frustration, his painted smile wilting by the minute. Even the air felt heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. Ethan Carter, CEO of Novacure Pharmaceuticals and one of the most powerful men in Ravenwood, stared down at his Rolex for what felt like the 100th time. 2 hours had passed since the party was supposed to begin. Not a single child had arrived. He forced a smile, though his throat tightened with every passing second. "Maybe they're just running late, sweetheart," he whispered, straightening the knot of his Italian silk tie. His eyes drifted to Sophia's wheelchair, the sleek chrome frame glinting under the chandelier. It was a daily reminder of the accident 2 years ago, the night that stole his wife's life and his daughter's ability to walk. Sophia's little hands adjusted the tiara on her head, a brave attempt to stay composed. But her eyes betrayed the truth. Hope was fading, and Ethan could see it. The excuses had always been polite. Traffic was bad. Something came up at school. We'll see you next time. But Ethan knew better. The families of Ravenwood's elite had been retreating ever since Sophia's accident. Her wheelchair unsettled them. Her disability reminded them of fragility, of imperfection, and in their world, that was something to avoid at all costs. The silence pressed in heavier than marble walls. Ethan adjusted his cufflinks, forcing optimism into his tone. "Don't worry, Princess. They'll come. They have to." But even he didn't believe his own words. Just then, the sound of the doorbell cut through the stillness like a spark in the dark. Ethan's heart leapt. Finally, someone had come. He strode quickly across the polished floor, rehearsing the warm, gracious greeting of a man used to commanding boardrooms. His best executive smile was ready. But when he pulled open the ornate double doors, that smile faltered. Standing there on the marble steps was not one of Ravenwood's privileged children in tailored clothes. Instead, it was a boy of about 8, his Superman t-shirt faded and patched, his sneakers worn thin at the soles. His skin glowed with youth, his eyes with something rarer, genuine joy. "Hi, sir," the boy said, politely, a gap where a front tooth should have been. "I live down the street, in the housing complex." He pointed past the iron gates, where the clustered buildings of public housing rose faintly in the distance. For a moment, Ethan just stood there, speechless. Of all the children who had been invited, of all the families who had declined, it was a boy without an invitation who had come knocking. And in that instant, something shifted, though Ethan didn't yet know that this simple, unexpected guest was about to change everything. Malik's arrival was not just an act of childhood kindness. It was the spark that would soon expose the hidden prejudice of an entire community. Malik stood awkwardly at the doorway, shifting from one foot to the other, his patched jeans brushing against the polished marble floor. The contrast between him and the mansion's grandeur was almost jarring, but his voice was steady, polite, and filled with sincerity. "I don't have an invitation," he admitted quickly, "but I thought maybe the birthday girl might be lonely. I can promise I'll behave." Before Ethan could respond, the sound of wheels squeaking against the marble echoed behind him. Sophia had maneuvered her chair closer, curiosity lighting her face. "Daddy, who is it?" Malik's grin widened, showing the gap in his smile. "Hi, you must be the birthday girl. Happy birthday. I don't have a present, but I can sing really loud if you'd like." For the first time in months, laughter burst out of Sophia, unrestrained and genuine. "Do you really want to stay at my party?" she asked shyly. "Of course I do. Birthday parties are the best thing ever." It was such a simple exchange, but it pierced through the thick wall of silence that had weighed on the house all afternoon. Ethan, standing off to the side, felt a knot form in his throat. In less than 5 minutes, this boy, a complete stranger, had accomplished what doctors, therapists, and endless distractions could not. He had given his daughter her smile back. The afternoon unfolded in ways Ethan never expected. Malik played with Sophia as though her wheelchair wasn't even there. He invented games where she was the heroine, complimented the decorations as if they were the most impressive sights he had ever seen, and marveled at the towering cake. "Whoa," he said, eyes widening. "That cake looks like it's straight out of a movie. At home, we usually just get the boxed kind." Sophia laughed so hard she nearly spilled her soda. "You're funny, Malik. You're the funniest friend I've ever had." From the window, Ethan watched them race around the garden, Sophia steering her chair with surprising skill, while Malik pretending to be the announcer of a grand championship. The scene was pure, effortless joy. Yet beneath it, Ethan felt a pang of guilt. How was it possible that an 8-year-old boy from the housing projects could show more compassion and grace than all the polished families of Ravenwood combined? The phone rang, breaking his thoughts. He answered, only to hear a cold, familiar voice on the other end. "Ethan, this is Victoria Langford," said the president of the Parents Association at St. Augustine Academy, the prestigious school Sophia once adored. "I need to discuss a delicate matter." "What's going on, Victoria?" Ethan asked, unease creeping into his chest. "Well," she continued smoothly, "some of the mothers have expressed concern. They say there's a different kind of child playing on your property, a child who doesn't belong in our circle." Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. "Are you talking about Malik, the only boy who cared enough to show up to my daughter's birthday?" "Ethan, you must understand. Our community has certain standards. We don't want our children mixing with unsuitable elements, especially around Sophia. Given her fragile condition, it's simply not appropriate." Through the glass, Ethan could see Malik carefully guiding Sophia's wheelchair through the garden path, both of them laughing like lifelong friends. The innocence of the scene clashed violently with the venom dripping from Victoria's words. "You know what, Victoria?" Ethan said sharply. "That boy has shown more kindness in 2 hours than most of your so-called friends have in years." Victoria's voice cooled even further. "Don't be naive, Ethan. Families like his always have ulterior motives. You'll see soon enough." When the call ended, Ethan stood frozen, the weight of her words pressing down on him. For the first time in 2 years, Sophia had been genuinely happy, yet even that was now under attack. And as the sun dipped below the Ravenwood skyline, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn, Ethan realized something unsettling. This wasn't just about a lonely birthday party. This was the beginning of a much larger battle, one that would soon test the very core of who he was and how far he was willing to go to defend his daughter's happiness. The weekend after Sophia's birthday should have been filled with laughter and new beginnings. Instead, it became the start of something darker. On Monday morning, Ethan's phone rang again. The caller ID read St. Augustine Academy. He braced himself. "Mr. Carter," the headmistress, Helen Whitmore, said in her clipped, formal tone, "several parents have contacted us with concerns. They feel Sophia's recent association might be affecting the environment at our school. Perhaps it would be best if she reconsidered certain friendships." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Are you referring to Malik? He's 8 years old, the only friend who showed up for my daughter." "Our institution has a reputation to uphold," Helen replied, her words carefully polished, yet sharp as glass. Ethan hung up before she could finish. His blood boiled. It was one thing for snobbish neighbors to whisper. It was another for them to target his daughter at school. But it didn't stop there. On Tuesday, Novacure Pharmaceuticals, the empire Ethan had built over 20 years, lost 3 major contracts in the span of hours. Long-term clients, partners he dined with and trusted for years, all citing strategic shifts and new market directions. Ethan knew better. This wasn't coincidence. It was coordinated. By Wednesday, the Ravenwood Golf Club, where Ethan had been a member for 15 years, sent a polite but pointed letter. Given recent controversies, the board suggests you reassess your membership priorities before renewal. Translation: step in line or you're out. Everywhere he turned, doors were quietly closing. The whispers of Ravenwood's elite were now deliberate actions. And behind it all, Ethan could almost hear Victoria Langford's smooth, calculating voice pulling the strings. The cruelest blow came Thursday afternoon. Sophia returned from school with red-rimmed eyes, her hands trembling as she wheeled herself into the living room. "Daddy," her voice cracked, "the girls at lunch said I can't sit with them anymore, because of Malik." She hesitated, her lips quivering. "They called him a bad word. I don't want to say it." Ethan knelt beside her chair, his chest tightening. "Sweetheart, listen to me. Malik is your friend. That's what matters, not what anyone else thinks." "But they said if I keep being his friend, none of them will talk to me again." Tears welled in her eyes. "Daddy, why are they so mean? Malik never did anything wrong." Her words hit harder than any corporate betrayal or social rejection ever could. They weren't just isolating him now. They were attacking her daughter's happiness, weaponizing her innocence. Ethan's hands trembled as he adjusted her blanket, his voice breaking. "They're wrong, Sophia, and I promise you, they won't get away with this." That night, Ethan sat in his study long after Sophia had fallen asleep. The mahogany shelves lined with awards and stock certificates suddenly felt hollow. For years, he had believed that power came from influence, from wealth, from belonging to Ravenwood's so-called inner circle. But now, as contract after contract slipped away and his daughter cried herself to sleep, he realized the truth. Their power wasn't real. It was fear. Fear of difference. Fear of losing their grip on control. And fear could be broken. Through the window, Ethan could see the faint glow of the Ravenwood housing complex in the distance. That's where Malik lived. That's where his family endured the kind of judgment Ravenwood's elite only whispered about behind closed doors. He remembered the look in Malik's eyes that day, wise beyond his years, a quiet resilience that seemed to say, "I've been through worse, and I'm still here." Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. They had crossed a line. This was no longer about social snubs or lost contracts. This was war against an 8-year-old girl and her only friend. And if Ravenwood's elite thought he would stay silent, they had underestimated him gravely. The next morning, instead of driving to Novacure's headquarters, Ethan steered his car toward the housing complex. He needed answers. He needed to understand the strength behind the boy who had walked into his mansion with nothing to offer but kindness, and left with his daughter's heart restored. Ethan's car rolled slowly into the Ravenwood housing complex, its engine humming against the quiet of the morning. The contrast hit him immediately. Cracked sidewalks, paint peeling from the walls, children playing with second-hand toys in narrow courtyards. Yet there was something else, too. Laughter, warmth, a pulse of community that Ravenwood's manicured lawns never had. He parked near a modest brick building and climbed the narrow staircase. Malik's directions had been simple. Apartment 3B, 3rd floor, knock twice. The door opened to reveal a woman with silver-threaded hair pulled into a neat bun. She stood with a dignity that seemed larger than the small space behind her. "Mr. Carter," she said gently, her accent carrying years of resilience. "I am Rosa Alvarez, Malik's grandmother. Please, come in." The apartment was humble but spotless. The scent of simmering spices lingered in the air. Photographs lined the walls, faces of children, graduations, birthdays. There was no extravagance, yet every detail spoke of care. "Jamal told me about the party," Rosa said as she poured tea into mismatched cups. "He said Sophia laughed again. That meant more to him than anything." Ethan lowered his gaze. "He gave her something I couldn't. He gave her joy." Rosa's smile was soft, but her words carried weight. Joy is the courage to keep living after loss. Malik understands that. He has seen rejection, but he has also seen love. That is why he knows how to give it. Before Ethan could respond, the door opened and a man entered, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. His construction uniform was worn, his face lined by long hours of labor, but his presence filled the room with quiet strength. "This is my son," Rosa introduced. Daniel extended a firm handshake. "Mr. Carter, I've heard about you." Ethan studied him for a moment. The man's grip was strong, his posture straight. Not the look of someone beaten down by circumstance, but someone who carried pride in every step. "I wanted to thank you," Ethan said earnestly. "Your boy, he reminded me what decency looks like." Daniel's eyes softened. "We don't ask for charity. We work for what we have, and we've taught Malik to do the same." Ethan nodded, his decision forming even as the words left his lips. "That's exactly why I came. My company is expanding its social programs. We need someone to oversee community projects, someone who understands real needs, not just numbers on a report. Daniel, I want you to take that role." Daniel hesitated, surprised. "Mr. Carter, I didn't go to college. I'm just a builder." "You have something more valuable than a diploma," Ethan said firmly. "You have integrity. You've raised a son with a stronger moral compass than half the CEOs I know. That's what I need in my company." Rosa's eyes welled with tears. "Why would you do this for us?" Ethan looked around the small apartment, at the family who had given his daughter back her laughter. His voice was low, almost confessional. "Because you remind me of who I used to be, before I got lost in a world that measures worth by wealth instead of character." For the first time in days, a spark of hope flickered inside him. He wasn't alone in this fight. The Rodriguez family carried something the Ravenwood elite had long forgotten: unshakable dignity. But Ethan had another secret. While Ravenwood's power brokers whispered and schemed, he had been quietly documenting their every move. Every call, every contract canceled under suspicious timing, every discriminatory remark. He wasn't just enduring their attacks, he was gathering the ammunition to end them. As he rose to leave, Daniel clasped his shoulder. "Mr. Carter, whatever storm you're walking into, know this: we've weathered worse, and we always come out stronger." Ethan met his gaze and nodded. "Good, because the storm is coming, and this time we'll face it together." Outside, the sky over Ravenwood darkened with the weight of an approaching evening. But for the first time, Ethan felt steady. The battle ahead wasn't just about contracts or reputations. It was about truth. And he had found allies strong enough to stand with him when the storm finally broke. By Monday night, Ravenwood City Hall was buzzing with anticipation. The agenda looked routine enough: zoning approvals, budget adjustments, and, buried near the end, item 15, final approval for the Ravenwood Heights project. To the city council, it was business as usual. To Victoria Langford and her circle, it was the final step in a scheme that would erase the housing complex where Malik's family lived and replace it with luxury condos. Inside the chamber, Victoria sat confidently in the front row, her pearl necklace gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Around her were the developers, the council members she had carefully courted, and a handful of Ravenwood's wealthiest families. Their smiles were sharp, practiced, the expressions of people certain they had already won. Mayor Randall cleared his throat, shuffling papers. Next item, final approval for Ravenwood Heights. The heavy double doors at the back of the chamber creaked open. Heads turned. Ethan Carter walked in, his stride calm but purposeful. Beside him was Daniel Johnson in his work shirt, Rosa Alvarez standing tall with quiet dignity, and Dr. Leonard Hayes, the attorney carrying a thick folder under one arm. Behind them, several investigative journalists adjusting their cameras, while a federal housing official followed close. Whispers spread like wildfire. Victoria stiffened, her smile faltering. Still, she leaned toward the developer at her side. Relax, he's desperate. He has nothing. Mr. Mayor, council members, I have information you need to hear before you vote. Randall shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Carter, this meeting is nearly adjourned. This isn't the place. With respect, Ethan interrupted, it's exactly the place. Because what you're about to approve is not just a development project. It's the culmination of a coordinated effort built on fraud, discrimination, and abuse of power. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Dr. Hayes stepped forward, placing the folder on the podium. He opened it deliberately, then pressed a button on a small recorder. Victoria's voice filled the room, icy and unmistakable. We need to make their lives miserable. Cut services, pile on fines, anything that forces them out. Once they're desperate, we'll buy the land for pennies. A stunned silence fell. Victoria shot to her feet. That's taken out of context, she snapped. But before she could continue, a federal officer spoke firmly. Miss Langford, that recording was obtained legally under a court-authorized investigation. You may want to remain silent. The next slide appeared on the projector. Emails between Victoria, developers, and council members. Phrases glared from the screen. Undesirable families. Ensuring the right social image. Accelerate removals. The room buzzed with outrage. The developer, Charles Morton, tried to slip toward the exit, but two federal agents blocked his path. Dr. Hayes's voice was measured but cutting. These documents show falsified property appraisals, contracts undervaluing the land at 30% of its market worth, and deliberate manipulation to push out families who have lived there for generations. Council members shifted uneasily in their seats. Reporters scribbled furiously. Ethan stepped forward again, his voice resonating with a quiet authority. For weeks, my family has been attacked. Business partners turned away. My daughter was isolated at school. And all because she found a true friend in Malik Johnson. An 8-year-old boy's only crime was showing kindness. He looked directly at Victoria. You called him unsuitable. You tried to shame a child. But tonight, the truth is clear. The real danger to this community isn't an innocent boy. It's the arrogance of those who believe wealth gives them the right to decide who belongs. Victoria's composure cracked. This is ridiculous. You're destroying Ravenwood over one child's friendship? Daniel rose from his seat in the audience, his voice steady, carrying across the chamber. No, ma'am, you destroyed it yourself. When you decided that families like mine don't deserve dignity. We came here to work hard, to raise our children in peace, and you turned it into a war. Applause erupted from the back rows where community members had gathered, their faces a mix of relief and vindication. The final blow came when Dr. Hayes displayed phone transcripts, conversations where Victoria and her allies openly discussed not only pushing out tenants, but also skimming millions through inflated construction costs. Not only did they target these families, Hayes concluded, they attempted to defraud the city and the federal government. These are not allegations, they are documented crimes.
Mayor Randall wiped sweat from his brow as federal agents moved forward. One by one, Victoria, Morton, and 2 council members were placed under arrest. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. As the handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists, Victoria turned to Ethan, her voice trembling with rage. "You think you've won. You have no idea what you've started." Ethan's reply was calm, almost gentle. "No, Victoria. What started tonight is the end of believing people like you are untouchable."
The chamber erupted, not in chaos, but in catharsis. Families from the housing complex hugged each other, some with tears in their eyes. Journalists rushed to broadcast the story, and Sophia, who had been sitting quietly with Malik near the back, clapped her hands together with a smile brighter than any chandelier. For the first time, Ravenwood had witnessed true justice unfold in the open, and Ethan knew this was only the beginning of change. The arrests that night rippled through Ravenwood like an earthquake. By morning, the story was on every local broadcast. The headlines splashed across newspapers. Council scandal exposed, family saved from forced eviction. For Ethan, it wasn't about victory, it was about relief. At last, the weight pressing on his family had been lifted. But the true measure of change came quietly in the days and weeks that followed. At St. Augustine Academy, Sophia rolled into school the next Monday, expecting whispers, cold stares, maybe even another lonely lunch. Instead, something different happened. A group of students approached her table. One of them, a boy who used to ignore her, set down his tray. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked nervously. Sophia blinked in surprise. Then Malik slid in beside her, grinning. Soon other children joined. The circle of exclusion had finally cracked. That afternoon, when Sophia came home, her face was lit with something Ethan hadn't seen in years: hope. "Daddy," she said excitedly, "they asked Malik and me to present at the diversity fair. They want us to talk about what true friendship means." Ethan's chest tightened, but this time it wasn't from anger. It was pride. Meanwhile, Novacure Pharmaceuticals underwent its own transformation. Contracts once lost were replaced by something stronger, a renewed mission. Under Daniel Johnson's guidance as the new Director of Community Programs, Novacure opened its first free health clinic in the very neighborhood Victoria had tried to erase. Within the first month, more than 1,000 families received care. Ethan toured the clinic one afternoon. Parents held their children close, grateful for access to medication they could never afford before. Volunteers in bright vests greeted patients by name. And in the center of it all, Rosa Alvarez moved gracefully from room to room, encouraging mothers, comforting the elderly, her silver hair glowing under the fluorescent lights. "This," Daniel told Ethan quietly, "this is what real impact looks like." And he was right. The changes spread further than Ethan could have imagined. Ravenwood itself began to shift. Families that once kept to their gated mansions now volunteered at the community center built on reclaimed land. Children from different backgrounds played side by side in the park. Even the school board, shamed by exposure, adopted new policies for inclusion, offering scholarships to underrepresented students. Sophia flourished in ways Ethan hadn't dared hope for. The girl who once sat quietly by the window, waiting for friends who never came, was now brimming with confidence. She and Malik became inseparable, not because they needed each other to fill gaps, but because they brought out the best in one another. Together, they even entered the regional science fair, designing a project on preventive medicine that won first place. When Sophia wheeled onto the stage to accept the award, with Malik beaming beside her, the applause thundered. For once, no one saw the chair, only the brilliance of the girl who occupied it. Ethan stood in the crowd, his eyes wet. This was more than vindication. This was transformation. Of course, not everyone landed on their feet. Victoria Langford, once the unshakable queen of Ravenwood society, found herself stripped of everything. Her mansion was sold to pay legal fees, her name dragged through court documents and evening news. Her social circle evaporated overnight. And for the first time in her life, Victoria had to live without the cushion of power she had always taken for granted. But Ethan didn't dwell on her downfall. He didn't need to. True justice wasn't about revenge. It was about building something better in place of what was broken. One evening, 6 months after the council showdown, Ethan sat in his study, Sophia's laughter echoing from down the hall. His phone buzzed. It was Daniel, calling from the clinic. "Ethan," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "we just treated our 3,000th child today. Rosa wanted me to tell you personally, thank you." Ethan leaned back, a slow smile spreading across his face. "No, Daniel, thank you for reminding me what this company, what this family was meant to stand for." Outside, the skyline of Ravenwood glittered against the night. But for Ethan, the brightest light was inside his own home, his daughter's renewed joy, her friendship with Malik, and the knowledge that the storm they had endured had given rise to something stronger, something lasting. The battle had ended, but the legacy it created was only beginning. 1 year later, the Carter mansion looked different. Not because of renovations or wealth, it always had those, but because of the sound that now filled its halls. Laughter, the kind of laughter that comes from children who feel safe, accepted, and free. In the garden, Sophia and Malik worked side by side on a school project. Sheets of poster board were spread across the table, covered in bright colors and bold words. "Diversity is strength." Sophia leaned over in her chair, carefully outlining letters, while Malik adding finishing touches with his steady hand. "Remember when no one came to my birthday?" Sophia asked suddenly, her voice soft but steady. Malik looked up, thoughtful. "Yeah, I remember." She smiled. "It turned out to be the best day of my life, because that's when I met you." For a moment, silence fell between them. Not the heavy silence of an empty hall, but the quiet weight of understanding. From the veranda, Ethan watched them, his heart swelling. He remembered every detail of that awful afternoon. The untouched cake, the empty chairs, the hollow excuses. But now those memories had been rewritten. The day that once symbolized rejection had become the beginning of something extraordinary. Later that evening, Sophia and Malik stood before an auditorium of parents, teachers, and students. They weren't nervous. They had lived the truth they were about to share. "People once told me my friend didn't belong," Sophia said, her voice carrying across the room. "But he's the reason I smile again. Friendship isn't about where you come from, it's about who you are." Malik took the microphone, his young face lit with quiet wisdom. "My grandmother always says, people who judge by appearances never see the heart, and people with good hearts don't care what bad voices think. She's right, because when you stand by each other, you change everything." The applause was long, thunderous, and not just for two children, but for the truth they carried. Back at home, Sophia rolled past the framed photograph her father had placed on the mantel. It was from that very birthday party, a single candle glowing on a massive, untouched cake, and next to it, one small boy smiling with all the courage in the world. The image had become their family's reminder. Sometimes what feels like the worst moment is only the doorway to the best one. And as Ethan looked at that picture, he realized something simple but eternal. True wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or gated communities. It's measured in compassion, in integrity, in the courage to see value where others refuse to look. Because sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin not with armies or speeches, but with one small voice asking the simplest question: "Can I join?" In the end, the story of Ethan, Sophia, and Malik reminds us of a truth as old as time. Human value is not measured by status, wealth, or appearance, but by the kindness we extend and the integrity we uphold. Too often, prejudice builds invisible walls between neighborhoods, between classrooms, even between children at a birthday party. And yet a single act of sincerity can tear those walls down. Life has a way of testing us in moments we least expect. Sometimes it comes as silence at a celebration, or a door closed by those we thought were friends. But as the saying goes, it's not the load that breaks you down, it's the way you carry it. Sophia found strength not in numbers or acceptance from the crowd, but in the courage of one true friend who saw her heart before her wheelchair. Ethan discovered that real power is not in boardrooms or titles, but in standing up to injustice with dignity. And Malik showed us all that even the smallest voice, when guided by compassion, can echo louder than the loudest chorus of prejudice. For each of us, the challenge is the same: to face unfairness with courage, to speak when silence would be easier, to recognize the worth in others and in ourselves. Because justice may come late, but it always comes to those who dare to hold on to what is right. What about you? Has there been a moment in your life when kindness broke through walls of prejudice or doubt? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. If this message touched you, please like the video and subscribe so you won't miss more stories that stir the heart and spark reflection. May peace and hope always find you, even in the midst of life's storms.